Chosen ones, there are moments when heaven does not thunder, when no trumpet sounds, when no angel stands blazing at the foot of your bed. Instead, there comes a quieter thing, a tightening in the chest, a disturbance in the spirit, a sentence that will not leave your mind no matter how busy you make your hands. We often expect God to shout, but more often he warns in a whisper, because whispers require closeness to be heard. And tonight, this is not a shout. It is a warning spoken close to the ear of the soul. Be careful. God is warning you about a man. He is not who he appears to be, and the danger is not in his strength but in his resemblance to what is good. There are few things more perilous than a counterfeit that almost passes for the real. A clear lie can be spotted, named, resisted. But a half-truth walks through doors unchallenged. This man does not come dressed as an enemy. He does not announce himself as a destroyer. He speaks the language of wisdom, borrows the tone of humility, and knows enough scripture, enough morality, enough kindness to appear safe. He understands how to nod at the right moments, how to agree with just enough truth to earn your trust. And this is why the warning matters. Evil rarely asks permission to enter, it asks for agreement. It does not demand allegiance at first, it seeks proximity. You have wondered why your spirit feels heavy after conversations with him, though nothing outwardly wrong was said. You have noticed how clarity seems to dull in his presence, how your convictions soften not by force, but by suggestion. He does not tell you to abandon your faith. He simply reframes it until it no longer costs anything. He does not forbid obedience. He offers a more reasonable version of it, one that fits comfortably with ambition, pride, or fear. He is patient, and patience can be a holy thing, but it can also be a strategy. This man studies you more than he listens. He watches for the places where your longing is loudest, where your wounds still ache, where your desire to be seen might override your discernment. He will affirm the gift God placed in you, but only so he can slowly reposition it under his influence. He does not wish to destroy your calling outright. He would rather redirect it just enough that it no longer threatens his kingdom, whatever shape that kingdom takes. And you must understand this. Not every kingdom wears a crown. Some are built quietly, brick by brick, out of influence, admiration, and unchallenged authority. God is warning you because you are not ordinary soil. Chosen ones attract attention in the unseen long before they are recognized in the seen. Light draws both moth and guardian. The enemy does not waste subtlety on those who are already lost. He reserves it for those who might otherwise walk straight through the narrow gate. This man is not sent to attack you openly. He is sent to walk beside you, to slow you just enough, to turn your head at a crucial moment, to make you doubt the urgency of obedience. He is charming, but charm is not fruit. He is articulate, but eloquence is not wisdom. He is confident, but confidence without submission can become a throne with no altar. He may speak often of peace, yet leave unrest in his wake. He may speak of freedom, yet subtly bind those who listen to him to his approval. He may appear generous, yet grow uneasy when generosity does not pass through his hands. And because he does many good things, you may feel ungrateful for noticing the unease. You may tell yourself that you are being judgmental, that love requires silence, that discernment is the same as suspicion. It is not. Discernment is not cynicism. It is love with its eyes open. It is the ability to sense when something that looks nourishing is quietly draining life instead. God is warning you because you have begun to excuse what your spirit has already identified. You have said, "It is probably nothing," when heaven was saying, "Pay attention." You have mistaken politeness for peace, agreement for unity, familiarity for safety. But the fruit has told the story, even if the leaves looked healthy. This man resists correction in subtle ways. He does not reject it outright. He reframes it as misunderstanding. He does not lash out, he sighs. He does not argue, he spiritualizes. He is always the reasonable one, the calm one, the misunderstood one, and if you challenge him directly, you may find yourself strangely cast as the problem, the one who is too intense, too sensitive, too rigid. This is not because you are wrong, but because truth unsettles those who have built their comfort on ambiguity. God is warning you, because proximity to this man will cost you something precious if it continues. It may cost you time, clarity, boldness, or joy. It may cost you your voice, slowly lowered, until you are no longer sure when you stop speaking what you truly believe. It may cost you obedience delayed one too many times. And delayed obedience, though it feels gentle, is still disobedience dressed in patience. Notice how often he centers himself in stories that should glorify God. Notice how easily he speaks about sacrifice when it belongs to others. Notice how rarely he is wrong, how skillfully blame slides off him and settles elsewhere. Notice how loyalty to him is praised as discernment, while questions are labeled as division. These are not accidents. Patterns reveal allegiance long before confessions do. This is not a warning meant to fill you with fear. Fear paralyzes, but this warning is meant to sharpen you. God does not whisper danger to terrify his children. He does so to free them. The purpose of light is not panic, but sight. You are being invited to step back, to create holy distance, to test what you have been told rather than swallowing it whole because it sounded wise. You are allowed to trust the unease God places within you. You are allowed to obey without having to explain yourself to someone who benefits from your silence. This man may not even know fully what he is doing. That does not make the warning less urgent. A blind guide can still lead others into a ditch. Intent does not cancel impact. Sincerity does not sanctify error. And your responsibility is not to diagnose his heart, but to guard yours. You are not called to fix him, save him, or expose him dramatically. Sometimes the most obedient response is quiet withdrawal, a refusal to keep placing your spirit in a position where it must constantly brace itself. God is warning you because there is a season ahead that will require clarity and courage. You cannot afford to carry extra weight, extra voices, extra confusion into what is coming. The road narrows and companions matter. Those who walk with you must strengthen your obedience, not negotiate with it. They must point you upward, not subtly inward. They must rejoice when God moves you beyond their influence, not grow threatened by your growth. You have felt the pull already, that gentle but persistent sense that something is misaligned. You have prayed and found no peace about continuing as before. You have asked for confirmation and received it in ways too consistent to ignore. Yet you hesitate because separation feels unkind, because boundaries feel harsh, because walking away from someone who smiles at you feels cruel. But obedience is not cruelty, and kindness does not require self-betrayal. This man thrives in the gray spaces where lines are blurred. He is uncomfortable with absolutes, uneasy with surrender that costs reputation or control. He prefers a God who affirms rather than commands, who comforts rather than sends, who explains rather than interrupts. And slowly, if you are not careful, that preference can begin to shape your own expectations of God. You may find yourself resisting the very sharpness that once set you free. God is warning you now, not later, because later the disentangling would hurt more. Now the threads are still visible. Now the cost of stepping back is manageable. Now obedience will feel like clarity rather than crisis. You are being given the gift of foresight, which is mercy disguised as discomfort. Do not wait for undeniable proof if your spirit has already been convinced. Proof is a poor substitute for obedience. By the time everything is obvious, damage is usually already done. Faith often requires acting when only enough light is given for the next step, not the whole staircase. You may never see this man revealed in dramatic fashion. There may be no public fall, no confession, no moment that vindicates your decision in the eyes of others. And that is all right. Obedience is not validated by applause. Sometimes it is validated only by the quiet return of peace, by the way your prayers regain their sharpness, by the sudden lightness you feel when his voice is no longer echoing in your decisions. God is warning you because he intends to use you, and used vessels must be guarded ones. Influence is not neutral. Voices shape paths. Companionship steers direction. And the man you LK beside will either sharpen your hunger for God or slowly teach you to settle for less while calling it maturity. You are not imagining this. You are not overthinking. You are not being dramatic. You are responding to a nudge meant to protect what has been entrusted to you. Take it seriously, take it calmly, take it without bitterness, without accusation, without spectacle. Simply take it. There is a strength in quiet obedience that unsettles manipulation. There is a power in boundaries that need no explanation. There is a freedom that comes when you stop trying to carry someone who was never meant to walk your road. And as you step back, as you loosen the tie, as you choose alignment over approval, you may notice something subtle but unmistakable beginning to return, a clarity of hearing, a steadiness of heart, a renewed sense of direction, as though the noise has finally thinned enough for you to hear what God has been saying beneath it all, calling you forward, warning you not because he is angry, but because he is attentive, because he sees the bends in the road ahead, because he knows what kind of man you are becoming and what kind of voices you cannot afford to keep beside you, as the path continues to narrow and the cost of distraction grows heavier with every step you take into the days that are unfolding even now, as you consider whether to listen, whether to trust the unease, whether to honor the warning before it needs to become something louder, something sharper, something that will interrupt rather than invite, because invitations are still being offered, and you are still free to choose how closely you walk, how carefully you listen, and how quickly you respond to the quiet insistence that has followed you here and has not yet finished saying what it came to say. There is a peculiar mercy in being warned before the storm gathers its full voice. Most people mistake mercy for softness, but mercy is often severe in its timing. It arrives when you would still prefer to delay, when obedience still feels optional, when walking away still looks like loss rather than rescue. God warns early not because the threat is small, but because your calling is large. The greater the weight a bridge is meant to carry, the more carefully its foundations must be inspected. And you, chosen one, are being prepared to bear more than you yet realize. You may feel the temptation to reinterpret the warning, to shrink it into something manageable. Perhaps you think it is only about being cautious, about adjusting expectations, about praying more and staying put. But warnings are not suggestions wrapped in poetry. They are invitations to action, even when the action is quiet and unseen. The difficulty lies not in understanding what to do, but in accepting what it will cost you to do it. This man has benefited from your presence more than you have benefited from his. He draws from your discernment, your sincerity, your hunger for God, while offering back something thinner in return. At first it seemed mutual. It always does. But over time the imbalance becomes apparent to those who are paying attention. You leave interactions feeling spent rather than strengthened, stirred rather than settled. You pray afterward not with fire, but with fatigue, and still you hesitate because he has become familiar, and familiarity has a way of disguising danger. As comfort. God is not impressed by familiarity. He is not bound by history. He does not say, "You have come this far, so you must stay." That voice does not come from him. God is always more concerned with direction than distance already traveled. If the road is bending away from truth, wisdom does not insist on continuing simply to justify the miles behind you. Wisdom turns, even when turning feels like admitting you misjudged the path. You may fear that stepping back will expose you to misunderstanding. Others may not see what you see. They may admire him, quote him, trust him. They may question your choice, quietly or openly, but obedience is rarely popular in its early stages. When Noah built the ark, there was no rain to explain it. When Abraham left, there was no map to justify it. When you obey this warning, you may stand alone for a while, with nothing but the quiet agreement of God to keep you steady. This man thrives on being needed, not needed in the obvious way, but in the subtle way, where others begin to doubt their own clarity without his input. He positions himself as interpreter, mediator, translator of truth. Slowly, people begin to check with him before they trust what God has already made plain. This is not always conscious on his part, but it is dangerous nonetheless. Any voice that inserts itself between you and obedience, no matter how polished, is a voice that must be questioned. God is warning you because you are beginning to sense how easily admiration can become allegiance. Admiration is not wrong, but it is slippery. It can tilt the soul without announcing itself. One day you are listening, the next you are deferring. One day you are discerning, the next you are defending. And somewhere along the way, you may find yourself protecting a man rather than protecting the truth. Warning arrives before that shift becomes complete. There is also this to consider: not every warning is about overt evil. Sometimes the danger is misalignment rather than malice. Two people can be sincere, gifted, and committed, yet walking in directions that will eventually pull them apart. If you ignore that divergence long enough, the strain will not only slow you down, it will tear something. God is sparing you that tearing. He is telling you now gently that what cannot walk together must not pretend to. You may be tempted to confront him, to explain everything you have seen, to lay out the reasons with precision. Sometimes that is right. Often it is not. Discernment includes knowing when explanation will only feed the very dynamic you are trying to leave. Some people do not need closure. They need boundaries. And boundaries spoken once are stronger than arguments repeated endlessly. As you create distance, do not be surprised if the pull intensifies briefly. When influence senses itself slipping, it often tightens its grip. He may become warmer, more affirming, more attentive. He may acknowledge small faults, offer partial humility, adjust just enough to keep you close. This does not mean the warning was false. It means it was accurate. The test is not whether he can change behavior temporarily, but whether your spirit is free to obey God fully in his proximity. If it is not, the answer remains the same. God is teaching you something about leadership through this. Leaders must learn when to say no without burning bridges, when to walk away without turning back to watch the reaction. They must learn that influence does not grant access to everything, and charisma does not earn unquestioned trust. This lesson is costly, but it is foundational. Without it, greater platforms would become greater vulnerabilities. You are not responsible for how this man responds to your obedience. You are responsible for obeying. His disappointment is not proof of your disloyalty. His confusion is not evidence of your error. Sometimes people are confused simply because they benefited from an arrangement you were never meant to sustain. Ending that arrangement feels like loss to them, even if it is life to you. Notice how, even as you contemplate stepping back, your prayers feel lighter. That is not coincidence. The spirit often rejoices before the mind catches up. There is relief waiting for you on the other side of this obedience, though it may arrive quietly rather than dramatically. Peace does not always announce itself with emotion. Sometimes it arrives as the absence of pressure you had grown accustomed to carrying. God is not asking you to harden your heart. He is asking you to strengthen it. There is a difference. A hardened heart closes itself to compassion. A strengthened heart opens itself to truth without being swayed by flattery or fear. You can bless this man without following him. You can wish him well without walking beside him. Love does not require agreement, and unity does not require proximity. You may wonder why the warning focuses on a man and not an idea, not a doctrine, not a situation. It is because people shape climates. Ideas pass through personalities. A distorted heart can bend even sound language over time. God is precise in his warnings because he is personal in his care. He names what matters so you do not waste energy guessing. There will come a day when you look back and recognize this moment as a hinge, a quiet turning point that altered more than you knew. You will see how easily things could have gone another way, how small compromises could have multiplied, how silence could have become habit. You will not feel pride about choosing well. You will feel gratitude that you were warned in time. For now, all you have is the next obedient step. It may be as simple as saying less, sharing less, involving him less in your discernment. It may be stepping out of a role, declining an invitation, choosing solitude over continued proximity. Obedience often looks unimpressive from the outside. Heaven measures it differently. Do not confuse patience with delay. Patience waits for God's timing. Delay waits for comfort. One is faith, the other is fear dressed in courtesy. God's warning is not meant to sit on a shelf until you feel braver. It is meant to be acted upon while your heart is still tender enough to respond. You are being trained to recognize weight. Some voices carry more than they should. Some relationships require more maintenance than they give life. Some alignments drain oil meant for your own lamp. God is teaching you to notice these things early, before depletion becomes crisis. As you loosen your grip, you may feel a strange mixture of grief and relief. Grief for what you hoped this relationship might become. Relief for what you no longer have to manage. Both feelings can coexist without contradiction. Loss does not always mean mistake. Sometimes it means transition. Remember this: God does not warn to control you. He warns to free you. He trusts you enough to alert you rather than override you. He invites you into partnership, into shared awareness of what threatens the work He is doing in you. This is not a rebuke, it is a sign of trust. The path ahead requires a clearer sound. You cannot march to uncertain rhythm. You cannot advance while constantly translating someone else's tone. You need simplicity, alignment, and companions who sharpen rather than soften your obedience. This warning is clearing space for those companions to appear, for voices that will call you higher rather than hold you closer. If you listen now, the adjustment will be gentle. If you ignore it, the correction will be louder later. God prefers whispers, but He will not abandon you to drift. He speaks again and again, increasing volume only when necessary. You are hearing Him now at a volume that still allows choice without force. Trust the unease. Trust the nudge. Trust the God who sees further down the road than you can. You are not losing something essential by obeying. You are shedding something that cannot go where you are being led. And as you continue forward, lighter and clearer, you may begin to sense that this warning was not merely about avoiding harm, but about making room, about removing a presence that would have crowded out something purer, something truer, something that requires your full attention and unshared allegiance as the days unfold and the road continues to narrow, inviting you onward with a quiet insistence that does not rush you, but does not release you either, pressing gently, steadily, reminding you that discernment is a gift meant to be used, that obedience is a muscle strengthened by use, and that every step taken in response. See to light increases your capacity to recognize it again when it comes, as it surely will, in ways both familiar and unexpected, calling you to listen once more. There is a discipline in listening that goes beyond hearing words. It is the discipline of resisting the urge to immediately justify, explain, or soften what has been revealed. When God warns, the soul often wants to negotiate. Surely, you think, there must be a way to keep the good and discard the danger, to maintain the relationship while trimming its sharper edges. But some things cannot be trimmed without losing their shape. Some ties loosen only when they are released altogether. You have been trained, perhaps unconsciously, to value harmony over truth, peace over clarity. But harmony purchased at the expense of discernment is fragile, and peace built on avoidance is temporary. God is not inviting you into conflict, He is inviting you into honesty. The honesty may disrupt appearances, but it will restore alignment, and alignment is the soil in which real peace grows. This man has taught you, without meaning to, how easily the soul can be distracted by personality. You have seen how intelligence can mimic wisdom, how confidence can imitate conviction, how familiarity can impersonate trust. These lessons are not wasted. They are part of your preparation. God often allows us to walk close enough to error to learn its texture so that we may recognize it again, even when it wears a different face. You may recall moments when something within you hesitated, when you felt the urge to speak but chose silence instead. You may remember prayers that felt strangely restrained, as though words were being filtered before they reached heaven. These were not failures, they were signals. Your spirit was learning to notice when it was being crowded. The warning you hear now is the clarification of those earlier hesitations, gathered and given voice. It is important to understand that separation does not always look like departure. Sometimes it looks like recentering. It looks like reclaiming your inner authority under God. It looks like deciding that not every thought needs to be shared. Not every insight needs to be processed aloud. Not every spiritual experience needs an audience. In a culture that prizes exposure, restraint becomes an act of wisdom. This man is accustomed to access. He is used to being consulted, involved, included. Access can feel like affirmation, and the loss of it can feel like rejection. But your obedience is not a referendum on His worth. It is a response to God's care for you. You are allowed to make choices that protect your calling without offering explanations that would only invite debate. There will be a temptation to check back, to see how He reacts, to measure whether you have misjudged the situation based on His response. Resist this. Looking back too often can tether you to what you are trying to leave. Remember Lot's wife, not as a figure of condemnation, but as a reminder that divided attention hardens the heart. Forward movement requires forward focus. As distance grows, you may notice how quickly your internal compass recalibrates. Decisions that once felt murky regain their edges. Scriptures that once felt dull regain their weight. Prayer becomes less performative and more honest. These are not emotional fluctuations, they are signs of reality. Jinment. The soul knows when it has been relieved of a pressure it did not name. God is not merely removing something from your life, He is restoring something within it. He is returning your sense of immediacy, your responsiveness to conviction, your willingness to obey without consensus. Chosen ones must learn to stand alone without becoming isolated, to listen to God without becoming deaf to others, to value counsel without surrendering conscience. You may wonder whether this warning will repeat itself in different forms, whether you are destined to encounter similar situations again. The answer is both sobering and hopeful. You will encounter similar tests, but not identical ones. Each time you respond rightly, your discernment sharpens, and the test changes. God does not keep His children in remedial lessons, He advances them as they learn. This experience will teach you to ask better questions of the people you allow close, not questions about belief statements or intentions, but about fruit, posture, and trajectory. Does their presence increase your courage or dilute it? Does their counsel point you toward obedience or endless consideration? Do they celebrate your dependence on God, or subtly replace it with dependence on themselves? These questions will guard you more faithfully than charisma ever could. You are also learning something about timing. Warnings often arrive when relationships still look promising, when there is still room for hope. It takes humility to accept that something can look promising and still be wrong for you. This humility will serve you well, because it keeps you from idolizing potential. Potential can blind just as effectively as deception. As you move forward, do not rehearse imaginary conversations where you justify your decision. That rehearsal keeps you entangled. Let your obedience be simple. Complexity often signals avoidance. The clearer the call, the simpler the response. You owe no one a defense of discernment exercised in good faith. God is attentive to how you handle this moment, not because He is waiting to punish a misstep, but because this moment reveals how you will handle greater responsibility. Influence multiplies consequences. If you cannot disengage now, quietly and cleanly, future separations will be louder and more painful. This is training in gentle strength. You may discover that the fear you felt about stepping back was exaggerated by proximity. Distance has a way of shrinking what once loomed large. What felt impossible becomes merely uncomfortable. What felt dangerous becomes manageable. This is not because the warning was overblown, but because obedience restores proportion. There is also a kindness in recognizing that this man's path is not yours. You are not required to walk beside everyone you respect. Respect does not require alignment. Sometimes the most gracious thing you can do is to allow others to walk their road without your endorsement or resistance. Neutrality, when guided by discernment, can be an act of peace. Do not expect immediate affirmation from God in dramatic form. Often the affirmation is the quiet absence of resistance. Doors open without effort. Decisions settle without anxiety. Prayer flows without strain. These are the signatures of obedience accepted, though they rarely announce themselves loudly. As time passes, you may see more clearly what you were being protected from, or you may not. God does not always satisfy curiosity. He satisfies trust. Knowing everything is not the same as being safe. Sometimes ignorance, when paired with obedience, is mercy. You are being shaped into someone who can carry truth without being owned by it, who can speak boldly without needing to be central, who can discern quietly without becoming suspicious. These qualities are not developed in ease. They are refined in moments like this, where the cost is real but the reward is subtle. Remember that God's warnings are not signs of danger alone, they are signs of destiny. He guards what he intends to use. He intervenes where there is something worth protecting. The very fact that you are being warned speaks to the value of what is being safeguarded within you. As you continue on this path, keep your heart soft. Do not let caution harden into mistrust. Discernment must always remain tethered to love, or it becomes distortion. Love sees clearly without surrendering clarity. Love listens without relinquishing truth. Love walks away when necessary, not with contempt, but with resolve. You will meet others who echo familiar tones, who remind you of this man in subtle ways. Do not panic. Recognition is not repetition. Awareness does not mean entrapment. You are better equipped now. You have learned to notice the early signals, the quiet shifts, the gentle pressure. These lessons will serve you again and again until discernment becomes instinct rather than effort. There is a simplicity waiting for you beyond this decision. Simplicity does not mean smallness. It means focus. It means fewer voices competing for authority. It means clearer mornings and steadier nights. It means prayer that feels like conversation rather than calculation. God is patient as you walk this out. He does not demand speed, but he does invite sincerity. Each step taken in honesty strengthens the next. Each boundary honored builds trust within your own soul. You are learning to be faithful to what you sense before it becomes undeniable, and that faithfulness will echo into places you have not yet seen. The warning is not fading because it was not meant to be fleeting. It lingers because it is meant to shape your posture, not just your decision. It teaches you to hold relationships lightly, to hold truth firmly, and to hold God closest of all. This ordering will keep you steady when circumstances shift. As you move forward, you may feel the urge to mark this moment, to name it, to memorialize it in words or memory. Be careful not to overframe it. Let it be what it is, an act of obedience. Obedience does not need ceremony. It needs follow-through. The road ahead will offer its own confirmations, not in dramatic revelations, but in the steady unfolding of alignment. You will notice that your steps feel less resisted, your vision less cluttered, your resolve less negotiated. These are the quiet assurances that accompany listening. And so you continue, not looking back, not rushing ahead, but walking with a steadiness born of trust. The warning has done its work not by frightening you, but by clarifying you. You are more attentive now, more anchored, more willing to let God define the terms of closeness and distance in your life. This willingness will shape your days, your decisions, your discernment, as you walk onward into what is next, carrying with you the memory of a whisper that came in time, that did not demand fear, only honesty, and that continues even now to guide your steps as the path unfolds, narrowing and widening in turns you cannot yet see, but can already trust, listening still, choosing still, responding still as the quiet conversation between your soul and God continues without interruption. The quiet insistence persists because God is meticulous in his care for those he calls. Every nuance of your spirit matters to him. Every hesitation, every flicker of doubt, every small awareness that something is off, he counts it. He does not overlook the subtle shifts in your heart, the early stirrings of discernment that most would dismiss. He nurtures them, refines them, and uses them to prevent calamity that you may never even see in full. This is the grace of being chosen. You are never too small, too distant, too inexperienced to merit his precision. You may notice that your internal rhythm changes as you take steps of obedience. Conversations that once left you foggy now leave you clear. Decisions that once seemed weighed down by uncertainty now present themselves with a sort of quiet inevitability. You realize that clarity does not come from ignoring danger, it comes from responding to it rightly. And the man about whom you were warned, while still present in some ways, no longer holds the same authority over your perception, because your eyes are attuned to patterns rather than appearances. You are learning to see beneath the surface, and seeing beneath the surface requires courage, honesty, and above all, patience with the truth. God's warning also teaches you about Tim, ing, and endurance. The man's influence may persist longer than you like. His subtle control, his charm, his skill in shaping perception, these do not vanish overnight. But endurance in this season is not about confrontation or struggle. It is about steady alignment with God's guidance. It is about holding to principles, even when circumstances press you toward compromise. There is power in being unmoved when the world expects movement, in keeping faith when the ease of concession beckons. You may find that your awareness begins to extend beyond this one relationship. Suddenly, the world is not just made of people, but of interactions, energies, intentions, and subtle cues. You start noticing how influence can be exerted in gentle forms, through attention, through affirmation, through subtle persuasion, and how critical it is to guard the heart against being drawn into the sway of even well-intentioned guidance. God is training you to recognize spiritual patterns, not merely moral right or wrong. This recognition is rare, and it will serve you in countless seasons to come. Do not underestimate the importance of solitude during this process. Withdrawal from the man's orbit is not punishment or exile. It is preparation. In the quiet, you begin to hear your own voice again, unfiltered, unmoderated. In the quiet, you begin to feel your own convictions resurface, the very ones that had been softened, delayed, or diluted in the presence of subtle influence. Solitude restores clarity, renews courage, and sharpens discernment. God often uses distance as a laboratory for the soul, a place where choices can be tested and convictions strengthened before being exercised in public life. You may also notice that as you step away, the man's influence wanes not because of confrontation, but because it is no longer nourished. Influence requires consent, even silent consent, and by withdrawing that consent, you reclaim authority over your own heart and decisions. This is not pride, it is obedience. This is not rejection, it is realignment. You are learning that protection of the soul is itself an act of worship, that guarding what God has entrusted to you honors Him more than acquiescing to someone else's control. God's warning is also about preparation for future relationships and responsibilities. The lessons learned here are not limited to this man, to this interaction, to this season. They are building discernment into your very nature, teaching you to navigate the world with both sensitivity and strength. You will meet others who speak beautifully, who move with grace, who command attention effortlessly. You will need to apply the same principles, notice patterns, observe fruit, measure alignment with God's word rather than with human charm, and act decisively when something does not fit. The path forward requires vigilance without obsession. You do not need to ruminate endlessly on past interactions or anticipate every possible deception. Instead, you cultivate a spirit that responds to subtle alerts, that listens to nudges, that respects discomfort as divine signal. Obedience is not a series of dramatic moves, but a continuous posture of attentiveness, a willingness to act promptly when guidance is clear, a patience that trusts God's timing when revelation is partial. You may feel residual attachment or regret. This is natural. The heart often lingers where it has invested energy, hope, or admiration. But emotional attachment does not cancel spiritual obligation. The training is in distinguishing between sentiment and sovereignty, between affection and alignment, between comfort and obedience. This distinction, once mastered, frees you from the chains of manipulation and positions you to step into the fullness of what God intends. Notice also that as you adjust your distance, other voices begin to emerge, voices that are steadier, more attuned to God's rhythm, less concerned with self-preservation, and more concerned with nurturing faithfulness. These voices are part of the reward of obedience, the subtle fruit that confirms you have acted rightly. They are not dramatic affirmations, but quiet companions, reflections of the realignment taking place within your own spirit. God is teaching you that influence is a serious matter, The people around you shape your thinking, tone your perception, and sway your imagination more than you may realize. Even the most well-meaning presence can inadvertently distort your priorities if it is not measured against the truth of God's word and the nudges of His Spirit. Being careful about whom you allow close is not cynicism. It is a protective stewardship of the soul. You may wonder if this vigilance will ever feel natural, if discernment will ever cease to be exhausting. Over time, it will. As you practice responding rightly, as you exercise obedience in these smaller, quieter moments, discernment becomes instinctive. Patterns that once required intense scrutiny become apparent at a glance. Warnings become easier to recognize, and the soul learns to act quickly without hesitation or overanalysis. This ease is earned, not given, and it comes through faithful practice in the trenches of obedience. There is also a profound beauty in the restoration of your own voice. The man's subtle dominance may have kept it in check, diluted it, or conditioned it to echo his approval. As you reclaim your space, your voice regains its original timbre. You speak with less calculation and more truth. You pray with less negotiation and more honesty. You decide with less caution and more clarity. This is the restoration God intends, not just protection from danger, but restoration of the authority and freedom that He has entrusted to you. You may also observe that your perception of good and evil becomes sharper. It is not that the world has changed, it is that your spiritual senses have been attuned. Where once you might have seen ambiguity as benign, you now see it as a potential test. Where once charm could blind you, you now recognize subtle manipulation. Where once complexity could paralyze you, you now approach it with discernment rather than hesitation. These are gifts of obedience, lessons of vigilance, fruit of responding to a quiet warning before it escalates. Finally, God's warning reminds you that your calling is precious, and the tools of why, our calling, your discernment, your obedience, your clarity, are worth guarding fiercely. The man who seems innocuous, who seems wise, who seems aligned, may have a trajectory that subtly pulls you off course. Protecting yourself is not isolation, it is preparation. It is keeping your hands, your heart, and your spirit ready for the work that is ahead, the opportunities that will demand full attention, full commitment, full clarity. This moment, then, is not merely about avoidance. It is about stewardship of your spirit, your calling, your peace. Every step you take in response to God's warning strengthens you for what lies ahead. Every boundary you establish restores space for His direction. Every act of obedience, though small or unseen, compounds into a readiness that will carry you through seasons that will require courage, integrity, and discernment beyond what you now imagine. The quiet insistence of God's voice is still with you, even as you navigate this delicate balance. It is the voice that will guide your steps when others' influence diminishes, when temptation to compromise arises, when the allure of familiarity threatens your clarity. It is the voice that will remind you that true strength is not measured by proximity to power, but by faithfulness to truth, by courage in discretion, by obedience in action. It is the voice that will continue to shape, refine, and guide the chosen, even in moments of doubt, even in seasons of waiting, even in the face of subtle seductions that seek to divert, distract, or dilute the divine purpose within you. And so, chosen ones, the warning you have received is not a burden but a gift, a gentle divine nudge to power. Protect what God has entrusted to you. It is a call to clarity, to courage, to obedience, and to discernment in a world that often celebrates charm over truth. The man who seems close, who seems wise, who seems harmless, has revealed himself not by grand acts but by subtle influence, and God has granted you the insight to act before compromise takes root. Trust the unease, honor the boundaries, and reclaim your voice, your peace, and your calling. Remember, obedience is not always loud. Sometimes it is quiet, patient, and deliberate, but it is always powerful. As you step forward, free from distraction, aligned with truth, and anchored in God's guidance. You will discover that the space cleared by vigilance becomes the very room in which your purpose flourishes, your faith deepens, and your destiny unfolds exactly as it was meant to.